Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and you're here to stay curious. For 20 years, our nonprofit, the U.S. Spacewalk of Fame Foundation, has been preserving the birth of the American space age that all began just about 9 miles to my left over here at Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Space Force Station now. And a museum was born out of that. And we love our museum, and we know that many of you out there have been to our museum and enjoy it, and we can't wait for you to come and visit things. But this is what our Stay Curious program is all about, is bringing you a taste of our museum to you, as well as some space history that you might not know about, astronaut birthdays, and of course, we're going to do more interviews with space workers, and that's something we really love to do, is get those conversations and oral histories. September 8th, a week from Wednesday, we're going to have Andy Allen, an astronaut, commander of a couple space shuttle missions, and he was the CEO or general manager of the Jacobs contract out at the Space Center right now. So we're looking forward to Andy Allen in a week. And we wanted to say hi to everybody on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and we've had some inquiries about Triple T, and we've talked to him today, and he's doing fine. In fact, he's hoping to come back Friday and do the Tales from the White Room with Travis Thompson, who you all know was the lead on the astronaut closeout crew, putting those astronauts in their spaceships. So. But we've been in touch with him, and he's getting over his little illness, and can tell you all about it hopefully on Friday. Get back to our regular schedule there. And by the way, Marty's been on vacation. I got Jessica Galloway doing the engineering work behind the computer and taking Marty's place on the camera. And just talked to Marty before the show, and he's crossed the Florida border and can't wait to get back home. So we'll be having Marty in our studio again tomorrow. Been quite a thing, this Stay Curious program. It's been a pleasure to put programs like this together for all of you about space history. And we've got some really significant things. I depend a lot on the astronautics.com website. There's an excellent, Mark Wade is the host of that. And I've talked with Mark, and he's given us full permission to use his stuff. And the first thing we want to kick off today in space history is I push a magic button is in 1959 on August 31st, a Congressional House Committee staff reported that lunar flights would originate from space platforms in Earth orbit, instead of the way that we ended up doing in a giant rocket. The final decision on the method to be used going to the moon must be made soon. This House committee said in 1959. Was it harder to rendezvous in space with a space station like you see here and then go to the moon, or a single big rocket to take us to the moon? Well, we ended up with a single big rocket, the Saturn V rocket. Also in space history, it's worthy to note that on this date in 2003, and let me get my crib notes on that. That was right there. This date in 2004 was the last launch from Launch Complex 36A at Cape Canaveral Station there. And that's the one that's on the tip. That's the launch pad near the tip where the lighthouse is, the white and white striped lighthouse. It's been there seen every launch. It's been there a couple hundred years, I think. And that's the last time 36A was used in its 42-year history. First launch was in 1962. This launch on August 31st, 2004 was an Atlas 2AS rocket there. 63 launches of the Atlas II and its variations were carried out between 1991 and 2004. All 63 launches were a success, all right? And this launch here was the 576th and final launch of a Rocketdyne-powered Atlas rocket. The payload was a Nemesis National Reconnaissance Office spy satellite. And we can't say enough about this gentleman here, this photograph taken of Murphy Wardman with his granddaughter Hannah, taken 10 years ago in 2011. And I've met Hannah. She's a young woman now going to college. And Murphy's in our museum every Thursday. He's 90 years old, all right? And he and his buddy Jack Martin, they were NACA guys before it was NASA in the late 1958, 57. And happy, this is Murphy in our recreation of the Launch Complex 36, a room just behind me over there. We're really proud of that because this is real equipment that was used on pad 36, 14, a couple others are thrown in there. But so glad to get Murphy on our program here. We have a conversation with Murphy Wardman, who is an electrical engineer, the lead electrical engineer for General Dynamics, and very responsible for all of these 63 launches of the Atlas II being a success, and many of those 570s. They had to blow a bunch up, he said, to learn. It was a big learning curve. But Murphy's real proud of the fact that hardly ever did the same part fail once they realized what had caused a problem with the early days back then. So God bless you, Murphy and Hannah there. We're always thinking of our wonderful people at the American Space Museum that I call national treasures. There's one right there, everybody. And you see Murphy was president of our museum and very instrumental in the past 20 years of its growth, particularly the Space View Park monuments. And we'll go to something new here. I'm going to bail out of that just a second. And we got some new followers from Twitch and Facebook. And stars are coming from AE. From who?
AE Commands.
Commands. AE Commands. COMANSE. Thank you very much there for your support. This is our first constellation of sponsors behind me. We've got the UCAC brothers on board. We're not going to show you what it looks like, but Jessica's teasing you there. We've got a director from our executive director, Karen Conklin, that she wants a whole zodiac of constellations tied into our museum and what we do here. So we're going to have fun doing that. So we appreciate all of our new people following us, particularly you on YouTube. You brought our levels up. It's made our IT manager, Bruce Jacobs, very happy. And it's all about getting sponsors and support for our nonprofit museum here. So wanted to mention, next we're going to talk a lot of the program about the Gemini spacecraft, the two-man Gemini that in 1965 and 66 had 10 fabulous missions. Every other month there was a Gemini two-man flight where we took everything to the limit, because we knew we had to take a week to go to the moon. 3 days there, 3 days back, a day there. So we had several 8-day missions, and then we had the 14-day Gemini 6 mission that was Gemini 7, that was so important. We had to rendezvous and dock with a spacecraft because we decided we were taking 2 spacecraft. One was going to be the mothership orbiting the moon, and the other one was the Spider lunar module that landed. And then we had to figure out the space suits on Gemini. So a very ambitious program, but it's sort of interesting to think about all the hybrids that NASA and the Air Force were thinking about with Gemini. And of course, none was, this is spurred by 2 things on this date in history. One, in August 31st, 61, it was suggested by Jim Chamberlain, who was a man that many of you don't know, but I'm going to tell you about him in a second. Jim Chamberlain suggested lunar landings by using a Gemini spacecraft, all right, on this date in history. And then also on this date in history, it was decided in 1963 that the Gemini spacecraft would land on the land with a parasail wing that we're going to show you here at the end of the program. And that comes very close to the Marquette family, a legacy that you'll kind of be amazed about, maybe, that my father was involved in, bless his heart. So let's show you what we're talking about with the Gemini module there. The manned orbiting laboratory had 17 astronauts chosen that were going to wear blue spacesuits to put into space a Gemini 2-man capsule at the top up there that had a hole in the reentry shield, that they would go and enter the manned orbiting laboratory that would be attached and then maybe left in space when they returned they detached the Gemini module, they plugged up that reentry access, and it worked fine. Actually, Gemini 2's out at the Air Force Station, Space Force Station, if you will. The only Gemini that was flown twice to test that reentry surface where they would have had a hole to go into the capsule there. So, but that never happened, of course, because, and they're all kind of hybrids. The lunar landing was an earlier idea. You're going to see that in a minute. The Mercury Mark II was a proposal which led to the Gemini program. They were going to initially do a lunar rendezvous with the Gemini spacecraft and a lightweight open cockpit lander that would have been like riding a go-kart down to the surface of the moon, if you will. All ranges for the application of Gemini, from spying to rescue stranded astronauts in space to going to the moon. And you know what? In hindsight, I wish we'd kept the Gemini spacecraft. Tom Stafford personally told me, the general, that it was like riding a sports car in space. On that Titan rocket, he was on the Saturn V, of course. So what fun it would be to have a national stable of Gemini spacecraft to go up and down when we wanted in there. Very good spacecraft built by the McDonnell Corporation in St. Louis. And here is what was one of these hybrids. This is the big Gemini, okay? And the big Gemini had up there windows, so you know that they're going to put people back there. This was going to be a detachable section that here you see another side view of it open in the McDonnell St. Louis facilities where they built the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft. And there again, you have in there the showing you where there's 5 seats there, 3 in the back, 2 in the front. And that would be detached once this big Gemini reached its space station or the Mole space station or wherever it was going. And then that'd probably be tossed away for reentry. And of course, the Gemini would bring back 2 people at a time. Not sure if the big Gemini was equipped with a heat shield here at that far end to bring back all of its occupants. The other idea that Chamberlain had was proposed lunar landing by the Gemini. And Jim Chamberlain was a NASA engineer par excellence. He was very involved with the development of all the manned spacecraft. And here is a concept of the Gemini with the gull wings open that was obviously landed on a bigger rocket on the moon. Quite crude. I mean, there's an astronaut climbing down Jessica, if you see there, on a hoist or something. That has to be 100 feet in the air. That would be very crazy. And thank you, John Bisney. I see John Bisney's name popped up there. John met him for the first time out at the memorabilia show at the Sands Space Museum. And thank you, John. And he's been a follower of our Stay Curious program for a while. I remember that because John corrects me when I'm wrong, and we appreciate everybody out there helping me dot the I's and cross the T's. But can you imagine taking a Gemini spacecraft and landing on the moon with it? And but you probably never heard of Chamberlain, and we may have a program on this Jim Chamberlain, who is described by space historian David Baker. And David Baker's got a big, thick tome of every mission. David Baker says, Jim Chamberlain, quote, probably one of the most brilliant men ever to work for NASA, unquote. And I'm going to ask some people that I know about Chamberlain, see if we can do some of the old timers around here, like our godfather Charlie Mars, and see what he says about this man, as I'm sure he knew him. He was the manager of the Gemini Project Office. That's why he was so important. And they were going to, but then on this date in 1963, okay, 2 years before the first Gemini was to launch, was this concept proposed of landing on the deserts out there at Edwards Air Force Base, which this actual test flight happened. And it was North American building this parasail wing that looks like an ultralight wing. And this is 1963. And I was so thrilled to see this at the Air and Space Museum when we visited there, the Udvar Hazy, to see Triple T's spacesuit. And I looked up when we were near the Discovery spaceship there, orbiter, and I saw this up in the air. And if if you're a Marquette, you will recognize this as part of our heritage, if you will, as something that my father was involved in. And that's enough tease for that right now, because this very vehicle is shown in the Smithsonian here. There it is. And this is what they called the Gemini TTV-1, all right? The North American Aviation built this full-scale piloted test tow vehicle to demonstrate the feasibility of paraglider landings in 1963. It was the first of 2 TTVs used to perfect maneuvering, control, and landing techniques. A helicopter released this, and with its wings deployed over the dry bake lead at Edwards Air Force Base where it landed. And that's the picture that we see here of it landing at Edwards. And one of the few tests done of this, okay? And coincidentally, my father was doing something similar with a paraglider wing. And that may have played into NASA not using this. But the paraglider wing, there's the TTV-1, okay, with this landing gear, more hardware to take to space that had to work right. Where are you going to stow this paraglider? Where are you going to put the wheels? Actually, though, the one we're showing here had rubber wheels on it. They were thinking of using landing skids, like a skid strip out there. And here's the paraglider wing. And this inflatable Delta wing was part of a test program by North American Aviation, the prime contractor. And we had a Stay Curious interview with Bob Giffen. Bob Giffen was a North American Aviation guy that worked on this. And I showed Bob some of these pictures of this paraglider wing, and he said the last time I saw that, we packed it up in a big long box and sealed it up and sent it to the Smithsonian because we weren't going to use it anymore. Francis Rogello, Rogallo, Rogello, was an engineer at the NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, and he invented the Rogallo wing. Didn't know it was called that, did you? In the 1950s, and the concept by which this paraglider was based on, okay? And here's another picture of it. A smaller version of it being used. And when I saw that again, I scratched my head like I did just now and said, gee, that looks awful lot like what my dad used. And there's my father leaning there with the helmet on and the jumpsuit there. That's Dad, Mel Marquette there. That's my little brother, Craig. And I'm standing with my hands clasped together there. And don't know the other gentlemen except they were 30-year-old friends of my father. And I think that's so cool to tie this in. Never thought I'd be able to talk to space lovers about how my father was involved in this. Yes, my father nearly died in this, okay? That's why it's a Marquette legacy gone bad. The first ultralight. My father was a champion go-kart racer in the 60s. And that's one of his go-karts. Lancer was the kart that he drove, and West Bend engines. And he had this idea because he was a crazy experimental aviation guy. Sorry to call you guys crazy, but my dad would sit in anything that had wings and a motor on it and a propeller. And the EAA conference in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, that they have every year, my dad crashed after this crash about 10 years later up there in someone else's plane. Dad lived a pretty long life into his 80s, though, but was always tinkering with an airplane and building balsa models at his workshop at home. So this was something he cobbled together, put and actually flew this behind we would tow him on the grass field at Macomb, Ohio. We grew up in Northwest Ohio, Findlay, and this little Macomb, Ohio airport had a grass field, and we towed Dad on an 80-foot rope till it hit 80 miles an hour, and then it would go get some lift, and Dad would let go of the rope. He had a little mechanism to do that, and he did a couple turns and landed quite nicely. I remember that. But about the 5th time he did this, he put a motor on it, and while we were getting that speed up, and I'm with these guys in a station wagon, okay, in 1963, just as it was getting lift, he hit a rut in that grass infield and shot straight up, which made him black out, And I remember seeing the rope just limply going down and watching my dad fling her down in this. He was strapped in with a seatbelt. And when he hit, I didn't know what to think because the guys were doing a U-turn at 80 miles an hour going back there, and he had ribs in his lungs and trying to fight for breath. He broke his wrist. He split his left ankle. He was very mess. And in 1963, there was some life-saving surgery in that Blanchard Valley Hospital in Findlay, Ohio, that saved my dad's life. And I remember talking to him on walkie-talkies that my grandpa, who worked at Cooper Tire and Rubber, got us some walkie-talkies so we could stand out in the parking lot and talk to Dad. And he was in almost a full body cast for a year. Quite an event in our life history. And his brother, Uncle Phil, also was an aviator. And I think Uncle Phil told the Cleveland NASA Center up there what my dad was doing. And I remember Dad being in the hospital and my mom getting a letter, and we went up and read it, and it was from NASA. And it said, well, how's your experiments going? We hear that you're working with a Paraglider Wing up there in Northwest Ohio. How things going for you? And I think my Uncle Phil wrote back, not too good. Okay, on there. So, because Dad nearly did die. It was quite a miracle here. And but yet he got well and had a great life afterwards. Crashed in another experimental contraption up there at Oshkosh in the 70s. And but this is one of the very few photos we have of this ultralight. And of course, Dad years later said, "Hell, I invented the ultralight," you know. And he's one of those guys that was always kind of one of the first guys doing stuff, but never made money off of it. Okay. But this was a very interesting chapter of our lives here, looking at this up in the Smithsonian. I couldn't help but think about Dad being in the air like that. And he had a couple of successful landings with it, but unfortunately that was the last one to have. So, Jessica, we have any other comments as we're nearing the end of another Stay Curious program? We hope you all enjoyed that little trip back in space history. That's what we love doing because as far as we know, nobody else is showing you space history like this. Next, so with the end of the space history, let's talk about the space present and go to, well, there we are. This young lady had her 50th birthday in space. Megan MacArthur, there she is celebrating on her Twitter post, okay. Megan, happy 50th birthday to you. We would have mentioned that, except we were doing our program on the stars every Monday. And we don't want to cross-pollinate that with anything but astronomy. But Megan MacArthur is on the International Space Station, and she tweeted this last night. What a great birthday dinner with my Expedition 65 crewmates, my hashtag, my hashtag Space Brothers went all out. Quesadillas and tortilla pizzas with real cheese, okay, exclamation point. Cookie decorating, exclamation. Cake with chocolate candles, exclamation. And she said, we haven't unpacked the ice cream yet, so I guess that means a second party. Well, glad you had a great first party. I brought some astronaut ice cream. That's not what Jessica's talking about. She's talking about for her birthday, they delivered the uncrewed Dragon, the cargo Dragon, for a birthday present. Had all kinds of goodies in it and had some real ice cream in there. So I've got some Neapolitan here, Jessica. Here, you can have some cookies and cream there for doing a good job today. And I'm going to take my Neapolitan out there and tell you all that we have ways to sponsor our program. And Jessica, put that up there, your logo there. And we've got a couple logos and photos we're going to put up here later in the week. Because we want you to help sponsor our museum in any way you can. There's Jessica's Cheap Development, hatching your social media dreams into reality. And I can't tell you enough how a whiz kid like Jessica that knows this social media is already making a big impact, not only with our Stay Curious program, but all areas of our nonprofit operation here. So we thank you for your devotion, Jessica, to our Space Museum. We've got over $10,000 in contributions in our star that is going to be unveiled behind us very soon. Our first constellation of the Stay Curious universe. So keep that coming. And I'm going to enjoy a little bite here of Neapolitan ice cream celebrating Megan MacArthur's birthday. As I chew that down, on behalf of our whole museum here, I'm Mark Marquette, Jessica, Marty will be here tomorrow, our whole great staff here of our nonprofit, the volunteers, and our small paid staff. Thanks you so much for following us. And we can't wait to see you in our museum soon to bridge the space between us. Stay curious.